when we bring in diverse talent, I think one of the things that we really fail to do, and I like to use this crop analogy, even though I'm not a farmer, so I'm probably getting it wrong. But imagine you always grew wheat, and then all of a sudden you wanted to actually grow some corn as well. And so you just take the corn and you put it in the same soil that the wheat grew in. And you expect it's going to grow and flourish. And a lot of times it doesn't take root, it'll die. And when we bring diverse employees in, you know, I mean, especially like female leadership, you know, I'm pretty tough. I was a tomboy. I have seen a lot of adversity. I am super resilient. I mean, I've been poor. I've been all kinds of stuff. But, you know, there's only so much you can take of the brouhaha and they want you to think like a man. They want you to use the same vocabulary. They don't want you to use emotive words. They want you to be all about facts and figures. And, you know, the context is not important. It's very exhausting. And it's kind of like that. It's bringing people in and then they die because it's not, yeah, I don't see anybody like me, but also I don't feel like I belong. I feel like I have to do all the translating, which then you think if you take people that are actually culturally different and speak different languages, how little we accommodate them because we use words and phrases that don't mean anything. I was raised by a mother who's Irish, British, so I thought I had a pretty good handle on the British language. And I was shocked that the cues that I missed or the things I didn't understand, and I'm a bit more bold, so I'd make a joke. I have no idea what you just said. I mean, I know the words, but I don't know what that meant. But a lot of people would never have the courage to do that. So how do we, you know, we have to raise our awareness, take a step back, remember what it was like. Everybody at some point probably entered a room where they didn't feel like they were belonged there.
Yes. Yes.
And if we keep that in mind, then I think it'll make a world of difference.
When we started NAWSP, it was based upon a hypothesis that in a world where traditional sales approaches were created by men for men at a time when men made up the entire sales force, how much faster and how much easier could women reach the top 1% if we had sales approaches that addressed the unique challenges that we faced while amplifying the strengths, the innate strengths that we have. And at the time, it was one of those things that people said, well, why do we need sales training for women? And the answer was always, imagine being told the only way you could be successful is if you were the opposite gender. Traditional sales approaches, and this is what I specialize in, so this is what I can speak to, the scripting, if a woman says some of the things that are in those books, she comes across aggressive. And she gets labeled that B word. It is unnatural. Absolutely. So women have to take those scripts, they have to modify them for their own personality. So why are we teaching and saying, here's a script, go out and say it, instead of teaching, here's the end result. I trust you, because I hired you, to come up with your own scripting to affect the change that you want. When you look through a lens and you only see one way to do things, like the automotive manufacturers in the 80s used to say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, you miss out on the opportunities of a lifetime. Instead, I encourage leaders to say, if it's not perfect, keep working. How can we support and develop our unrepresented groups? Don't call them minorities, because minority is saying you are inferior. So again, it's that language. So how can we support our underrepresented minorities through ERGs, through training, through don't get me started.
Oh, you go.
I think you are absolutely right. I think it comes down to a thing that we all know and we've all lived across all of our lives and our professional lives. And that is, there is a systemic problem that has been replicated because those at the top have been lazy and not willing to make a change. And it comes down to a simple fact. There is equity in talent. There is not equity in opportunity and access. And
Right.
That's where the system is broken.
Yes. When I did a panel discussion and I asked a table of male sales leaders, I said, if a man comes to you and says he wants to go into sales leadership, what do you coach him on? P&L, forecasting, numbers, and they listed all these quantifiable things. And I said, if a woman individual contributor comes to you and says she wants to go into sales leadership, what do you coach her on? Oh, well, relationship building and confidence and emotional intelligence. And I said, why the discrepancy? And they looked at each other, and then they looked at me, and they said, we don't know. That's just the way we've always done it. So to Roderick's point, it is a systemic problem that needs to be overcome, and it's up to leadership to say the system is broken. Let's be intentional about fixing it.
Mm.
And it's a fair point. If you think about, I've got 2 daughters, and the way I used to talk to them is my little princess, and you're going to be saved by a prince. You watch all these Disney movies, and they grow up and they're going to be saved. And my daughter wants to marry Prince Harry, and I'm thinking, what have we done? Right? Why do my daughters need to be saved by a man? Why do they? What my youngest one is of my color, and my other one is lighter. And her role models were always Pocahontas or the Princess and the Frog, the sort of dark princesses. And my other one she likes the blondes and the light. So you look at that and said, the kids already building up a picture that we're thinking, why are they thinking like that? Society is created and building that, and they're growing up to accept that this is the norm. And what I've found is that being a role model is one thing, right? But it's the environment and the culture, and I'm sorry to use the word culture, but the environment that we have in our business and how people act and how they talk. If you go into a room and you've got women sitting around the table, and you come in and start talking about, did you see the game yesterday? And they're not into the game, or they're not into that particular subject, you're already feeling isolated or alienated from the group. And you mentioned about the culture, about going out and having that sort of happy hour with your team and building bonds. I had a situation in my business, which is embarrassing to say, where I had a female leader and I had a male second in command. And that female leader was driving that business. And the feedback from the business was, because of the second in command going out with the team, doing all the incentives, that's why the business is successful. And we took the female leader out of the business. We got the man in charge because he kept saying, I'm going to do it. Female business got another role in the business, and that business was never the same, because we didn't appreciate the qualities and the skills of running a business. And what we kept looking at is the chanting and the incentives and the drive, and not about what's the substance behind it all. And I think we as leaders have to start thinking about the way we address situations. And we as leaders have to make sure we have an impact on what we're doing, because I had a wake up call. I had to sit around and look at myself and say, if I'm talking in a certain way, it might come across sexist. If I'm not talk to my staff about other things that are important to them, then people feel like they've got special treatment, and they feel isolated. And when I started addressing my senior leadership team and said to the women, how do you feel? They didn't feel comfortable telling me, because they think that's going to work against me. Have I got an attitude? I'm causing problems. So we had to make sure we had to get an external company in to really evaluate what the deep problem we had in our business, so that we could address it. And unless you know what your problem is in the business, if you're sitting there going, oh, it needs to change, but you're not aware of it, then how are you going to change it? And I think there are so many companies that I'm seeing now are not even aware of the issues. The leaders of the company go, oh, let's pass that to our D&I department, or let's pass that to our chief people officer. And the CEO is going, well, I've done my bit, I've delegated that. And the company will see, if the CEO and the leader is not serious about the changes, then they're not going to be serious about the changes. And I think we've just got to be conscious as leaders ourselves to see what impact can we have, and be conscious about the whole of society basically stereotyping us or putting us in our little boxes. And then we wonder why we have trouble when men say, oh, it's your relationship building I'm worried about, or we don't hit you with KPIs in the same way. That's just crazy, right? But that's the way a lot of men have been brought up, and therefore they think it's the norm, and we have to make them aware of it. And if we don't make them aware of it, it won't change. And I think we've got to keep pushing.
Yeah,
I agree.
Question. Sorry, if I could, Stephanie, do you want to make a comment? And then if
No, I was just going to say, I agree 100%. If you don't acknowledge a problem, you can't solve it. And so often when it comes to female and male gender problem, or when it comes to people of color, the problem lies with the men and the problem lies with the white race. That's y'all's problem. It's not our problem. We result negatively from that problem. We're impacted negatively from that problem, but it is not our problem. It's a problem, it's y'all's problem that you've inherited from the people that came before you. And it's a heavy problem. It's become a bigger burden to carry, and it will become a bigger problem if it's not addressed and acknowledged and solved. Now, the good thing is we as women, we as people of color are happy to help you solve that problem. so that we can all be, that weight can be lifted from all of our shoulders. But 100%, we first have to acknowledge that there is a problem, whose problem it is, and how we all together can solve that problem.
Yeah, and I think also treating everyone equally when it comes to promotions, and how, you know, we've talked about how they're invested in. I'm sure probably everyone on this call and many listening, I know that I did not get promotions that I deserved. I had to do extra. I had to do
It's not even about equally.
wait longer, even though it was completely deserved. Or the criticism that you would see of females who would have a couple drinks at an outing, but the men who were smashed and cheating on their wives, nobody said anything. And, you know, I'm not saying that everyone doesn't have some bad behavior out there, but it was very, we got to treat people the same. You have a set of standards and values and rules, and the way that people get promoted, the way that they get managed, the way that their performance is judged, it needs to be across the board.
Fact-based decisions, not emotional, right? Sometimes it's emotional decisions. Let's, if you can get result to fact-based decisions. And I think when we started to do our reviews of our staff, it was important from the top down that you had clear objectives in place. And if you hit those objectives, and therefore you're going to be promoted. But what tends to get caught into it is the emotional element of it. And, you know, and I think sometimes we saw a lot of people leaving because they felt they weren't getting promoted based on their results, based on what their contribution is. And because they didn't go down the pub, or because they didn't do this, they didn't do that, they felt they couldn't succeed. Or if they didn't work a 16-hour day, you know, and work from home, or they had children at home, and all those sort of factors. Right. So there's a lot of things that have to change. It is changing slowly, but I think there needs a lot of waking up to be done from, like you said, the elite white middle class males who are in the position of power. They need to be woken up to say, look, you can have the biggest impact on this. And that's,
do you think there's a role though for individuals? I look back on my career, and you know, I've had to be quite brave to Tamara's point. You know, I've had to sort of get a few scars on my back. I ended up being one of 7 female store managers for Tesco, the grocery retailer here in the UK. At the time there were 422 male equivalents. And I remember as a young woman walking in to a conference for the store manager population, and frankly being completely and utterly overwhelmed and intimidated at the time, because I'd come out of personnel, as it was called then, HR now, people, and been persuaded by Terry Leahy that he wanted more women in those roles. And so I had to retrain and take huge personal risk and lose all my status and all the nice treats that I had as a personnel and training manager, and go and learn how to lay out a fish counter, learn how to, you know, put on a delicatessen, serve people on the checkouts, blah, 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 very unglamorous, and then rework my way through to becoming one of those women. I think we do have to accept that those in positions of less, you know, representation also need to support each other, but lean in and be brave at times and almost demand some of that opportunity. And I just wonder if that's something that resonates with any of you guys.
Absolutely.
Catherine, absolutely. 100%.
If I could speak to that, if I could speak to that real quick, as a female in tech, for the last,
Stephanie, there's a question that kind of relates, I think, because it says, what's the difference in your opinion between equal opportunity and equality of outcome?
I think that's a simple one. And that is back to what everyone has said. Until those that are in power start making the shift, we don't move from diversity to an inclusion, right? And that's where we've got to make that big change. Is the mindset will then change what has been labeled as culture. And then we're going to make the change, because if it doesn't happen, there, to Stephanie's point, there's nothing that we as the underrepresented can do to change this. Until those that are in power, that make the decisions, that make the hiring decisions, decide, to do things differently, it's going to continue to do that way. And I think the biggest mindset shift we've got to go is get away from the word equal and fair. Look, fair stopped when mom used to parse out M&Ms one by one. Fair is not an adult word. Let's move from fair and equal to mutually equitable. And I think when we do that, that's where the shift happens.
Yep, it's about equity. It's about equity. As a female in tech for the last 22 years, and especially as a Latina in tech, Latinas are at the very bottom of the totem pole when it comes to the pay gap. And I've experienced that my whole life, which is why I've always felt like I was digging myself out of a hole and could never catch up until I got into the Salesforce ecosystem. I've seen it firsthand. It's not about the equal promotions. Once you get someone like me in that role, it's about equity and giving me the tools that I need to succeed with my peers who have had a head start against me because of the lives that they were privileged and born into. When you hire people, women, people of color, you have to have that sustained development. You have to give them access to those VPs, to those SVPs, to the CEOs, so they are learning from, eating from that table and learning from that as quickly as possible so they can ramp up and they can continue to make a path for the people behind them. I have been fighting for the last 22 years, not just for my rights, but for the rights of women who look like me, because there are not enough women like me. There can't just be one. I am not gonna be happy with just one or two or three. We need more until the boards and the companies are reflective of the world that we live in. So I have to keep pushing myself to do better because I'm figuring it out so that I can turn around and share it with the people behind me. Yes, I'm doing well, but I still have a lot of Latina sisters who are not doing well. My African-American Black sisters are not doing well, that I have to figure it out. That is a weight that I have to carry, not just for me, but for my communities, which is why I create all these programs so I can do it as quickly as possible. That's why, Gary, I'm all about quickness. We don't have time. They are struggling, they're hurting. And we got to figure out, we as a community, we as leaders have to figure out how to help them, how to save them. We talked about earlier about how with this pandemic, you know, people say we're all in the same boat. We're not, we're all in the same storm, but we all have very different boats. And I recognize I have a great boat, but it's still hard and I struggle. So I can't imagine what people who aren't even in a boat and they're treading water and just trying to keep their head above water, how they're doing right now. So that's why time is of the essence, and we've got to figure it out. And it's about equity, no longer about equal. Thank you, Roderick. It's about equity and how we give that to them.
Yes.
Well, it's also about teaching and sharing those rules, to your point. I think as underrepresented folks, we've been playing checkers for a long time. The problem is those that are in power have been playing chess, and they never taught us the rules of chess, so we kept playing checkers. Now, I challenge everyone on this panel, start teaching those that are in your circle underrepresented, regardless of what label may be hung on them, what the rules of chess are and why they have to stop playing checkers right now.
And teach them how to play chess, because when white America catches a cold, Black America, Latin America, Asian America catches pneumonia.
Yep.
Bingo.
Period.
Absolutely.
Point blank.
Amen.
Every single time. And while we're on the subject, DE&I, that role needs to report to the CEO, not to HR, because DE&I.
Thank you.
Yes.
It can't be a tick box and it can't be compliance.
No.
Nope.
It's
And
not
that's
a
where,
people problem,
unfortunately,
it's
most
an
of the
equity
time
problem.
it's relegated to your point. It is a
Yes.
people problem. And CEOs solve people problems.
Yes, they do.
Derek, you have just started an initiative, a charter. Do you want to mention that? Because I wanted to ask you to talk briefly about that, because I think it's very germane to what Roderick and Stephanie and all of you have been saying. It is about commitment. What are you willing to do and how quickly are you willing to do it? So can you just briefly mention the charter, because it's just launching?
Yeah, diversityinclusioncharter.com. And so any of you guys who are really feel strongly about making a change, please make a pledge about what you're going to do. Now, what I've not tried to do is to overcomplicate it. From my own frustration, speaking to a lot of people and being involved in a number of different businesses, I'm so bored of the talk. It's like I'm bored of hearing the same old stuff for God knows how long. Yep. And I appreciate, you mentioned, Roderick, that the why has to be there, right? And I'm a great believer of you need to know why we need to change. And the data will back that up, why we need to have a more inclusive environment. And it's another word that I'm more, I feel a lot more, comfortable with, is create an inclusive environment, then everything's sorted, right? But I'm finding that when I'm speaking to a lot of people, they're saying, I want to change, but I don't know how.
Don't know how.
And I want to change, but I've got other things to do. And I said, okay, look, we sent out this D&I charter out to people that I know, and said, look, can you please commit to this and tell me what you're going to do in the next 12 months to have an impact on diversity and inclusion? Mm-hmm. And 80% of the people came back to me and said, Gary, I don't know what to put down. And I said, right, I can't give you the answer. Go back and really think about, because if you're not thinking about it, how are you going to make a change? Go back and think about what you're going to do different going forward to impact your diversity inclusion policy. And they always go, oh, I can't give you an answer now. And I said, that's great, because I don't expect you to give me an answer now. If you're going to give me an answer in a week's time or 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time, that's fine. But I want you to come back with something to show your commitment of what you're going to do different. And it's been one of the biggest challenges that I've found in getting people. So that just shows you, these are people that are willing and want to make change, having the difficulty of putting something down, not only to say, I'm going to be accountable, responsible, with outcomes. And then in a year's time, we're going to sit down and say, how have you done against your pledge? And to me, I've just introduced this. It's going live as in August. And I'm trying to get as many people to commit to it, to say, right, it's in public records now. We can look back and see exactly what you've done. And that's why I feel passionate about it, because I've been listening to people talking for so long. I want to see some actions in place.
I love that idea.
More action, less words. Gary posted it on LinkedIn. So if you go to his page and look at his post, you could share it and encourage those that you know that have the opportunity to make these commitments and really drive change. We can all accelerate.
Yes.
Faster, because like you said, Stephanie, we don't have time.
One thing that I found, Gary, is that people have good intentions. They want to affect change. They want to increase their diversity numbers. When I ask them, and I ask every single partner of NAWSP, what are you trying or what have you tried? And they say, nothing. And I say, why? And they say, well, if I can be quite frank, I don't know where to begin. A lot of people are talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. We want this, I'm committed to this. What are you doing? And they don't know. They don't have a clue. They're consciously incompetent. They know what they don't know, but they don't even know where to begin. So if you could,
because we're both doing judging on women in sales. When mine got noticed, I put it out and I tagged people in that I knew had opportunities to nominate females in their business for recognition individually or as team leaders, and also for the business that they have these fantastic women. And but I just don't know if they will, right? I mean, which isn't a criticism to any of them. It's just that those are the tiny little ways that you begin to not just mentor and support people, but you actually sponsor them forward. But
going back to that D&I issue, right, about they don't know what to do. A lot of it's an excuse, right? Because when I think about the priorities they have on this, it's so low. So I was talking to a company recently, and they had a BAME division, right? And basically they were saying, what can we do to create, that sort of BAME, more of a BAME environment? And every single person on that job was working as part of their job. It wasn't a full-time job. It was something they were doing as part of it. So when they went to their senior person in the business to say, we need to do this around diversity and inclusion, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to have money, we need to have time, we need to have commitment, we need to have full-time employee. They said, well, can't you carry on doing that as part of your job? So if that is the attitude of the leaders about this little thing in the corner called diversity and inclusion, and we've got a little small budget for diversity and inclusion, but our biggest budget is on areas that we think are more important, then it just stems up, it's not that important to you. So the fact that it's not that important to you, you're not putting the effort into it, then what do you expect your results to be? If you try to do sales as a part-time salesperson, you're up against someone who's doing it 100% of the time, you're never going to beat them, right? So we all know it's about, you've got to put the effort in and the commitment. The way they're treating diversity and inclusion in businesses, it's such a small part of their priority. It's so low down on the list. It's just a box ticking exercise. And then when the results come through, they go, oh, that's a shock, isn't it? We've put a lot of effort into that. In the great scheme of things, you haven't. And I think we need to really address the issue about, if it's that important, let's make sure that you report on it. And if it's that important, you put staff and money behind it. And what happens is it's not core to the business. And that's why we're not seeing hardly any change over the last 10 to 20 years.
I think the majority of companies say it's a nice to do rather than it's a must do.
Yes.
If they knew that diverse sales teams have an actual an average revenue increase of 15%, they would be all over it. A lot of leaders won't make changes unless they see a dollar ROI.
Absolutely.
They won't do things just because it's the right thing to do. For example, Amazon.
They're afraid to rock the boat.
Yeah, they don't want to rock the boat. Amazon is a profit generating company, yet they have, in the Detroit area, all of their employees are forced to work mandatory overtime, totally negating the fact that we are in the middle of a pandemic and coronavirus is running rampant. That tells me that the company, and a lot of companies out there, put profits before people. And that's a huge problem.
Unfortunately, right now, D&I is a hot topic, or it's the cool thing to do. So there's a lot of companies trying to do this because it's the right thing to do.
Great.
How about if we shift the mindset from the right thing to do to doing it right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Then we can make some changes.
Yes.
That's so nicely put. Well, I'm conscious that you all may have other commitments, but I do think we could talk for ages. I would love to give each of you an opportunity as we close out, and then I'll quickly summarize. But you guys have so much depth and richness and wisdom and great tips. So if you have any closing words, any rally cries to people that are listening to this today or that will listen to it, I ask that you would just share them so that we can do better, go faster, and make an equitable environment for us all to work in. Catherine, can we start with you?
Yeah, I think start by leading from the front and doing something as a role model personally, regardless of what level you're at. Whether I took on a lady called Rabia Khan, who was in sales, Tamara, in your old organization.
Yeah.
She very timidly approached me one day on a visit out to a contact center she was based in Manchester, and asked if she could have a meeting with me, and apologized profusely for being so forward. And I said, you can do better than that, I'll mentor you, which I then did for a year. She was one of the most successful women in sales, Middle Eastern extraction. Absolutely incredible experience, because she taught me far more, I'm sure. So I think, doing something, however small, but very impactful, has a huge, it's like lighting a small fire. So anybody who's listening, help someone else who looks very different from you, and you will start to, be the change in the world you wish to see, to quote the famous Gandhi.
All right, Stephanie, do you want to go?
Yes. Speaking of, first of all, thank you for having me part of this panel. I've loved having these conversations with each and every one of you. I'm looking forward to continued conversations. The theme that I heard the most is people don't know what to do or how to do it. And it's just do it. I think of one of my heroes, Martin Luther King. He was 25, 26 when he picked up the charge for civil rights movement and everything that he did at such a young age, and that heavy burden that he carried. And when I think about the work that we need to do, I'm going to quote one of my favorite quotes of his is, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? It starts with one person. Look at your circle. Look at who you spend your time and day with. Look at the sales trips, the reward trips, the lunch clubs that you're on. If they all look like you, you've got a lot of work to do. And just reach out, just educate yourself, and start by helping those who have not had the same opportunity and access as you. We all work hard. I get tired of hearing that. You just have to work hard. No, all of us work hard, but we don't have the same opportunities and development that so many of you take for granted. So if you've got that privilege, do what I like to call deplete your privilege bank. Privilege is often looked on as a bad thing, and it is a bad thing when you keep it to yourself and only share it with your circle of privilege. But when you start sharing that privilege that you have and giving it away to others, then it's a good thing. I started with zero privilege, and I work every day to give that privilege away so that when I leave this earth, I have the same amount of privilege, which is zero, because I've given it all away and shared it with people. So I encourage you, be like Martin Luther King, Mandela, be like Maya, be like John Lewis. Help others. It's not just about us. When you help others, you make the world a better place.
Thank you. Gary.
Yeah, we talked earlier about it's all about the profits, and we need to hit them in the pockets then. If companies are not prepared to change, then we need to talk about it. We need to expose them. we need to make sure that we're going to take a stance to get it. And I don't, if it's going to hit their pockets, then you'll see companies having to change. So I think we're in a world now where if you look at Black Lives Matters, right? What's been going on, what happened recently has been going on for years, right? It's been going on for God knows how many years. As a youngster being brought up in Brixton and Camberwell, got stopped and searched all the time. I've seen so many atrocities growing up, racism and everything. It's been there. What we're seeing in companies now is that they're shielding their racism. They're hiding behind the corporate. They're hiding about everything. We need to make sure these companies who are not making a change, that they have to start reporting on it. We have to start asking questions about what are they doing about their culture and their environment. We have to look at their workforce. And if they are doing the atrocities, and we talk about things like Amazon and things like that, we're in a world now that we should be sharing that, and there will be a backfire against it. And if there's a backfire, you know what's going to happen? They'll change. So I think we just need to start being vocal about it. We need to keep talking about it. Let's not make this seen as it's a trend at the moment. Like being black at the moment is like, oh, it's trendy. Oh yeah, we've got to do something now. And then in 6 months time, it's like, oh, let's move on to something else. We've got to keep this going. We've got to be consistent on a bit about it. And we've got to make people accountable for their actions. And talk is cheap. Let's see some actions in place. And I think that's what we've got to be driving.
All right, thank you so much. Cynthia.
Yes. Your underrepresented minorities in your companies are being recruited heavily because big companies realize the power of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. If you are not treating your employees right, if you are not, in a word, celebrating them, they will go someplace else. Because after all, nobody wants to go someplace where they are tolerated. Everybody wants to go someplace where they are celebrated.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Yep.
I wish I came up with better words like that. I need to go into consultancy. That was just like, Lord, that's nice.
I'm so glad you followed her, Gary. I'm so glad you followed her, Gary, not me.
Roderick,
you're going to top that. I know you are, because you come out with some beautiful sayings already. I'll leave you with two things. First of all, corporate is here to make a profit, not friends. So to your point, Gary, the only way that it's going to impact them is to hit them in the wallet. And the final piece is change does not happen because it's the right thing to do. Change happens when we do things right.
There you go. Beautiful.
Amen.
Change happens because we do it right. Well, listen, I am the most fortunate person to ever have sat on this panel with you guys. You are each brave and paying it forward and making a difference and using whatever privilege you've amassed, not just through your hard work, but through the intention that you want to drive. And I thank you so much for being with us today, for doing this on behalf of CSO UK. We will certainly try and amplify all the things that you've shared going on from here. Please, when we post it, feel free to share it. And I owe you a debt of gratitude for all you shared today. So thank you. And to all the attendees, I hope you are taking away things that you can put into place, that you're no longer wanting to do it, but not having a clue about how to get started. Just do it, like Stephanie said. And anyone on here, I'm sure, will be happy to give you some ideas if you really, really lost. Make the commitment, sign the charter, get it done.
Thank you. Yeah.
And we'll all win. Have a great night and a great day.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks all.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.